I wasn't going to tell this story. For a long time, I convinced myself that silence was safer, that if I kept it inside, if I stopped replaying it, stopped writing it down, stopped saying the names out loud, then maybe whatever followed me out of that place would lose interest. That hasn't happened. If anything, it feels closer now than it did 2 years ago, so I'm writing this because I'm out of better ideas. Because I'm tired of waking up in the middle of the night and staring at the corners of my apartment until sunrise. Because I need someone, anyone, to tell me whether they've heard of a place like this, or a thing like this. And because if I disappear, at least there'll be a record somewhere that I tried to explain it. 2 years ago I was studying historic preservation. That's the simple version. The more accurate version is that I was 22, broke, desperate for field experience, and naive enough to think that every decaying structure in the middle of nowhere was just another line on a resume. Old houses, churches, mills, depots, anything with age on it and structural damage I wanted to see up close. That was my whole life back then. Classes during the week, site visits whenever I could get them, and the constant feeling that if I worked hard enough I might actually build a future out of the past. That was how I found the listing. It was posted in a student board that most of us used for internships, equipment swaps, and side jobs. Usually it was boring stuff, survey work, drafting, document cleanup, but this one stood out. Volunteers needed for urgent stabilization of historic wooden church. Remote site, rural Pennsylvania, no pay, no housing, no transport, which for some reason made it feel more real. There was a grainy photo attached, a church standing in a clearing under an overcast sky. Tall, narrow, blackened wood, steeple still standing, though slightly off-center. Windows dark, porch sagging. It had that look some buildings get when they're technically upright, but already halfway gone, as if the shape of them lingers longer than the material does. I remember staring at that picture way longer than I should have. There was something about it that pulled at me, not beauty exactly, not even curiosity, more like recognition. Like I'd seen it before, somewhere in a dream I couldn't quite remember. I sent the link to 2 people. Ryan answered first. Ryan was one of those guys who moved through life as if the world had been built specifically not to challenge him. Tall, athletic, loud without being mean, the kind of person who could talk to anyone and treat danger like a joke until the last possible second. We'd done 2 field projects together before. He was useful, confident, and almost pathologically unwilling to admit fear. His reply was immediate. Looks haunted. I'm in. Claire answered about half an hour later. Claire was harder to summarize. She was quiet without being shy, and smart in a way that made other people feel noisy. She split her coursework between preservation and folklore studies, which most people, including me at the time, treated like a quirky side interest. She always had a notebook on her, always noticed details no one else mentioned. The smell of a place, the orientation of a doorway, the way locals talked around something instead of about it. Her reply was just, "Where is it?" I sent the county name, the coordinates, and the listing. She didn't respond for another 10 minutes. Then, "I can go Saturday." That was it. 3 days later, before sunrise, we left in Ryan's truck with coffee, tools, camping gear, 1 borrowed camera, and exactly the kind of optimism people always have right before they do something stupid. The first 3 hours were normal enough. Highways, gas stations, the usual half-awake conversation. Ryan complained about the playlist, then took over the music. Claire sat in the back with her headphones around her neck and read printed copies of old county records she'd downloaded the night before. Around the 4th hour, the roads narrowed, the towns got smaller. The gas stations got farther apart. Phone service started dropping in and out. By the time we turned off the last paved road, the morning had flattened into that dull gray light you get before rain, except the sky never actually opened. The road from there was gravel, then dirt, then something that barely qualified as either. Deep ruts, branches scraping both sides of the truck, grass growing up the middle. Twice Ryan had to stop and get out to drag Deadfall out of the way. "No way this place still gets visitors," he said after the second time. "Maybe that's why they need volunteers," I said. Claire was looking out the window. "No," she said quietly. "Places can be inaccessible without feeling abandoned." Ryan glanced at her in the mirror. "And this one feels abandoned." She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "It feels avoided." None of us had much to say after that. At some point the GPS started acting strangely. Not in a dramatic way at first, just little inconsistencies. The route line lagging behind our actual turns. The position marker drifting off-road for a second and snapping back. Then, about half an hour later, the map showed us driving across what looked like an empty green field with no road at all. Ryan tapped the screen. "Cool," he said. "So either we're lost or the satellite gave up." "We're still moving in the right direction," I said, "assuming those coordinates are right." "They came with the listing." "Yeah, and nobody has updated the road here since maybe the Civil War." I was about to say something back when Claire leaned forward between the seats. "Stop." Ryan hit the brakes. Claire was staring through the windshield. "There," she said. Off the side of the road, half hidden by tall grass and saplings, was a post with a weathered sign attached to it. Most of the paint had peeled away. The wood was warped and gray, but you could still make out a few letters. Dry Creek Hollow. Ryan squinted. "That our place?" I checked the listing again. The church site had been listed as part of an outlying settlement zone in Dry Creek Township. I hadn't paid attention to the word hollow before. Claire opened the door before the truck had fully stopped rolling. The air outside was colder than it should have been. Not freezing, just wrong. She walked to the sign and touched it like she was checking whether it was real. "There's no date on it," she said. "So? Signs like this usually get county replacements. This one didn't get replaced. It got left." Ryan looked up the road ahead. The trees thinned there. Beyond them, barely visible through the branches, I could see open ground and something vertical in the distance. The steeple. It took another 15 minutes to reach the settlement. I used the word settlement because town would be too generous and village too clean. Dry Creek Hollow didn't feel built so much as gathered. A loose cluster of houses in a shallow depression between tree-covered rises, all facing slightly wrong directions, as if they'd been set down over time without much plan and had slowly turned away from one another. The church stood apart from the rest, not in the center, off to one side. That was the first thing that bothered me once we were close enough to see the layout clearly. Ryan parked near what had once been a general store. No movement, no smoke, no sound. That's not an exaggeration. I don't mean it was quiet. Rural places are quiet all the time. I mean the usual little texture of the world was missing. No birds, no insects, no leaves moving overhead. Nothing. Just our truck ticking as the engine cooled and the faint crunch of our own boots on gravel. Ryan opened his arms. "Well," he said, "either we found the perfect restoration site or we accidentally drove into a low-budget horror movie." I laughed. That's one of the things that gets me now. How normal we still were then. How completely, stupidly normal. We unpacked gear, took some photos, and did a quick walk around the church exterior. The wood siding was warped but intact in places. Porch supports rotted, roofline bowed on the south side. One of the windows had been boarded from the inside. Another was cracked but not broken. Claire circled the building without speaking. Ryan tested the porch step with his boot. "You think this thing's salvageable?" he asked. "Maybe," I said, "if the foundation isn't gone." Big if. The doors were chained but loosely. Not padlocked, just wrapped and hooked like someone had meant to secure them once and never bothered finishing the job. Ryan unhooked the chain. "You sure?" I asked. He grinned. "We drove 6 hours for a haunted church in the woods. Of course I'm sure." The doors opened inward with a dry wooden groan that seemed much too loud in the silence. The smell hit us immediately. Damp timber, dust, old plaster, a faint trace of mold, and something else, something sweet under the rot. Not floral, not chemical, just sweet enough to be wrong. Ryan made a face. "What is that?" Claire stepped past us. "Incense." The interior was larger than I expected, though the walls leaned subtly enough that you only noticed it if you looked twice. Rows of ruined pews, a collapsed section near the back, dust thick enough to show us our own footprints clearly. Behind the pulpit, the wall paneling had darkened almost black. Ryan walked toward the altar. "Hey," he said, "there's a basement hatch." It wasn't really a basement hatch. More like a rectangular trapdoor built into the floor just off the right side of the altar area. One side had sunk lower than the other, leaving it crooked in its frame, and it was open. "Didn't you say the place was supposed to be restricted?" Ryan asked. "Limited access," I said. He looked at the opening and then at me. "Well, somebody got here first." Claire crouched next to the hatch without touching it. "Do you hear that?" she asked. For a moment I thought she was imagining things. Then I heard it too, very faint, a soft, intermittent sound from below, not scratching, not dripping, something with rhythm to it, like wood knocking lightly against wood. Ryan switched on his flashlight and stepped through the opening onto the narrow stairs below before either of us could stop him. I followed because I didn't want him down there alone. Claire followed because I think she knew none of us should split up anymore. The space under the church was not what I expected. I had been picturing dirt floor, exposed beams, standing water. Instead, it looked like a room, a real room. Not finished in any modern sense, but enclosed, deliberate, maintained just enough to feel wrong. The walls were old timber and stone. The floor was hard-packed earth with only a little dampness. Along one side stood narrow shelves built into the supports. Most were empty, one wasn't. On the middle shelf sat a wooden figure about a foot tall. Ryan's flashlight hit it first. For a second, none of us moved. The figure had a vaguely human outline. Head, torso, suggestion of folded arms, but no features at all. No carved eyes, no mouth, nothing painted. Just smooth, worn wood, pale from age except where handling had darkened it in places. It should not have been the scariest thing in that room. It was. Claire whispered, "Don't touch it." Ryan looked back at her. "Why?" "Because it doesn't belong here by accident." He turned the light back to the figure. "You say that like it belongs here on purpose." "It does." He laughed softly. "That sentence doesn't make me want to touch it less." He lifted the figure off the shelf with both hands. The sound came immediately, not from the shelf, not from the room, from somewhere below us. A long, slow inhale. Deep enough that I felt it more than heard it. The air shifted, as if the room itself had just become aware of us. Ryan stopped smiling. "You heard that," he said. Claire took one step back. "Put it down." Ryan hesitated. Then instead of putting it back, he tucked the figure under one arm and said, "Let's go upstairs." Back upstairs, the church felt different. It took me a minute to identify why. The light, the daylight coming through the windows looked weaker, flatter somehow. Not darker exactly, more drained, as if someone had turned down the saturation of the world outside. Ryan set the wooden figure on a pew and rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay, not funny anymore." "Put it back," Claire said. He looked at her. "That breathing sound, yes. You think this did that? I think we shouldn't still be holding it." Ryan picked it up again. And I think if we drove 6 hours to an abandoned town and found something hidden under the church, it might be worth taking a better look before we throw it back into the creep hole. Claire's jaw tightened. It wasn't hidden for us to find. Ryan opened his mouth to argue but stopped. He was looking past me. Through the dirty glass panels of the church doors, I could see the nearest line of houses. And maybe this sounds impossible because it is impossible, but the street outside looked fuller than it had 10 minutes ago. There were more structures visible between the trees than I remembered. At first I told myself I was just seeing them from a different angle. Then I walked to the door and realized that didn't explain it. When we'd arrived, I'd counted 6 houses from where we parked. Now I could see 10, maybe more. Claire came up behind us. She did not sound surprised. We need to leave. We loaded the truck in under 5 minutes. Not carefully, not logically, just fast. The way people move when the mind hasn't caught up, but the body has already decided something is wrong. Ryan threw the figure into his backpack after I told him not to. Claire saw it and swore under her breath. "Are you out of your mind? What was I supposed to do? Leave it in there?" "Yes." He slammed the tailgate shut. The truck didn't start. Ryan tried again. Nothing. He frowned, checked the dash, tried again harder. The engine clicked once, then nothing. "Battery?" I said. "It was fine this morning." Claire had gone very still. "We're not taking the truck." Ryan turned in his seat. "What? We need to walk." "Walk where?" "Back to the road, now." He stared at her, then at the silent dashboard. "No, I'm not hiking 6 miles through the woods because the battery glitched." He raised the hood. I wanted to help. That still felt like the sensible thing to do. But then I looked at the settlement again. There were definitely more houses, not a trick of perspective, not nerves. Actual houses where I would have sworn there had only been trees and empty lots before. And one of them, one I knew for a fact I hadn't seen earlier, had curtains moving behind the glass. No wind, no sound, but the curtain moved. I stepped back without meaning to. Claire was watching me. "You see it now," she said. I nodded. "What is this?" She shook her head. "I don't know exactly, but there are stories. We need to leave." "About what?" I asked. "About places that grow around something, places that make room." "For what?" She looked toward the church. "For whatever wakes up there." Ryan spent the next 15 minutes failing to revive the truck. Battery terminals clean, no obvious damage, fuel line fine, nothing. It simply refused to turn over. By then the afternoon had begun slipping toward evening. The gray light outside deepened into that bruised color right before dusk, and the cold sharpened. "We go on foot," Claire said. Ryan looked at the truck, then at the road behind us. "Fine," he said. "We take what we can carry." He slung the backpack over one shoulder, the one with the figure in it. Claire saw where my eyes went and whispered, "We're not getting far with that." Ryan heard her. "Drop it, right? Because that'll help." She stepped toward him. "It's tied to this." He laughed, but weakly now. "What does that even mean?" "I don't know, but whatever changed here changed when you picked it up." Ryan stared at her for a second, then at me. "Are we seriously doing this?" "I think," I said, "that maybe putting it back wouldn't hurt." He looked like he wanted to argue. Then the sound came. Laughter. Faint. Far enough away that for 1 second I almost believed it belonged to actual people. Children maybe. Then it came again, and no human part of me could pretend after that. There was something wrong with the rhythm of it, wrong with the pitch, as if the sound had learned what laughter was from memory instead of experience. Ryan went pale. Claire whispered, "It knows." We left immediately. At first the road still looked like a road. Narrow, overgrown, but clear enough to follow away from the settlement. We walked fast, then faster. No one spoke for a while. The only sounds were our boots in the dirt, the shift of gear, our breathing. After maybe 15 minutes, Ryan said, "Do you remember that fallen tree?" I looked up. "What tree?" "The one we had to move on the way in." I looked behind us. The road stretched back between trees I didn't recognize. No fallen tree, no tire marks, nothing. My mouth went dry. "We keep moving," Claire said. We did. Another 10 minutes. Then the road curved left in a way I was certain it hadn't before. Then we passed a mailbox, then another. Ryan stopped dead. The second mailbox was attached to a post in front of a house, one of the houses from the settlement. The church steeple rose above the trees behind it. We had walked away for half an hour and somehow circled back without ever turning around. "No," Ryan said softly. "No." He turned full circle as if expecting the forest itself to admit a trick. Claire put one hand over her mouth. I heard the laughter again, closer. The light was fading fast now, too fast, like dusk had skipped the slow parts. "We go through the woods," Ryan said. "Forget the road." We cut between two houses and into the tree line. For a little while, that seemed to work. The settlement vanished behind us. The ground sloped upward, brush thickened. I started to believe, irrationally, that distance alone might still save us. Then we found the first porch, not attached to a house, just a porch, weathered and gray, standing in the trees ahead of us where there should have been nothing. 3 steps, a sagging platform, and a doorframe with no walls around it. Ryan swore. Claire stopped so suddenly I almost walked into her. "It's spreading," she said. Ryan turned on her. "Stop saying things like you know what this is. I know enough." "Then tell us." She clutched her notebook so tightly the cover bent. "There are accounts," she said, breathing hard. "Folk architecture myths, places that repeat, settlements that aren't fixed, structures appearing where they shouldn't, usually around burial grounds or old worship sites. The story is always the same. Something gets contained, then disturbed, then the boundary between the place and whatever surrounds it starts to fail." Ryan stared at her. "That is not an explanation. It's what I have." The laughter came again, this time from multiple directions. We ran. It's hard to describe panic honestly because by the time it's real, your mind stops organizing things into clear sequence. I remember pieces, tree branches whipping my face, Ryan cursing behind me, Claire breathing hard somewhere to my left, a window frame in the woods, a front door where no house should have been, the smell from the church showing up in cold gusts where there was no wind. Then Ryan screamed. We both turned. He hadn't fallen. He was standing about 20 feet behind us, twisted halfway around, staring between the trees to his right. "What?" I shouted. He didn't answer. Then I saw it. Not clearly, just movement in the dark between trunks. Tall, pale, wrongly vertical in a place where only trees should stand. Ryan backed away from it, one step at a time. The backpack was still on him. "Ryan," Claire said, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Drop the bag." The thing in the trees moved closer, not fast, deliberately. Ryan yanked the backpack off his shoulder and threw it. It hit the ground, rolled, and the wooden figure slid partway out through the unzipped opening. The movement in the trees stopped. Everything stopped. Even the cold seemed to hold still around us. The wooden figure lay on its side in the leaves, faceless and pale. Then, very slowly, it rolled another inch on its own. Ryan made a sound I never want to hear from another human being again. The thing in the trees laughed. Not loud, not from a mouth, from everywhere around us at once, and Ryan broke. He lunged for the bag. Claire shouted, "No!" He grabbed it and ran. The thing moved at the exact same second. I still don't know whether what I saw next was real in the normal visual sense, or whether terror scrambled it into fragments. I remember Ryan making it maybe 10 yards. I remember something pale unfolding itself out of the dark to my right, far taller than any person should be. I remember limbs where I expected branches. I remember a face that wasn't a face, not empty like the figure. Worse, as if features had once been there and been smoothed away. Ryan screamed my name. Then he was gone behind the trees, not dragged, not knocked down, just taken out of sight in a rush of movement that snapped branches and ended with a sound like wet wood splitting. I stood frozen. Claire grabbed my jacket and pulled so hard I almost fell. Run. We ran downhill without direction, crashing through brush and roots and low branches, the world reduced to impact and breath and terror. I shouted Ryan's name once, maybe twice. No answer, only that laughter again, farther off now, then close, then far, impossible to place. At some point, the ground leveled out. Ahead of us, through the trees, stood more houses, not scattered now, a full street, porches, fences, window glass reflecting the last of the dead gray light. Claire stopped. No, she said. I almost collided with her. We had not run back toward the settlement, and yet there it was in front of us again, only larger now, denser. Every window looked dark, every doorway open. Move, I said. Claire didn't. She was staring at the backpack. Somehow, somewhere in the run, I had ended up with it. I still don't remember taking it from Ryan, but it was in my hand. Claire looked at me with something close to despair. It won't let us go with that. I dropped the bag immediately. Nothing happened. The settlement stood silent. Then, from one of the nearest porches, came the slow creak of weight shifting on old wood. No one was visible, but something had stepped there. Claire stooped, took the figure from the bag, and held it in both hands like it might burn her. It's tied to the boundary, she said, almost to herself. What boundary? The one between this place and outside it. Then break it. I don't know how. The porch creaked again. Another answered farther down the street. Then another. Invisible footfalls, approaching. Claire looked at the figure, then at me, and I saw the decision happen on her face before she said a word. No, I said. Her expression didn't change. It won't let both of us leave. You don't know that. I know enough. The laughter was gone now. That was worse. Silence had replaced it, and silence meant attention. A shape moved behind the nearest window, tall, still, watching. Claire's voice dropped almost to a whisper. Listen to me. If it's making room, if the town is growing around it, then distance won't matter unless something holds it here. This might be the only thing that still does. I looked at the figure in her hands, smooth wood, no face. Then back at her, she was terrified. I could see that clearly now, but underneath it, there was resolve. And I hated her for it in that moment. I hated that she could decide something I couldn't. I hated that she might be right. A front door on the nearest house opened inward with a long, slow groan. Nothing stood inside it, but the dark beyond the threshold looked occupied. Claire shoved the figure against my chest. For 1 second, she said. I grabbed it reflexively. It was colder than the air, so cold it hurt. And at the exact instant it touched my palms, every house on the street gave a tiny settling creak at once. Like a whole town leaning forward, Claire snatched it back. The pressure in the air eased, not gone, just redirected. She gave me one hard push. Run! I didn't, not immediately. I looked at her, at the houses, at the church steeple behind them, at the dark doorways and windows and porches that seemed to breathe without moving. Then something stepped out onto the porch nearest to her. I only saw part of it, a shoulder too narrow, an arm too long, skin the color of old paper, no face. I ran. I ran because there was nothing else left to do. I ran because whatever courage people imagine they would have in a moment like that does not survive contact with the real thing. I ran because Claire screamed my name once, not for help, but like an order. Branches tore my arms, roots caught my boots. I fell twice, got back up both times, kept going. The forest changed around me as I ran, not just density or direction, configuration. Sometimes I was between trees, sometimes between fence posts. Once I passed the side wall of a house that ended abruptly in empty air. Another time I crashed through brush and found myself on a narrow lane with wheel ruts and mailboxes on both sides, only for it to dissolve back into woods 20 yards later. Night came fully, but unevenly. Patches of darkness deeper than others, as if some sections of the forest had already crossed into another hour. I heard nothing behind me for a long time. Then, very far off, I heard Claire scream. It cut off abruptly. I kept running. There is no heroic way to tell that part. I kept running. Eventually, the ground rose sharply under my feet, and I climbed more than ran, grabbing roots and rocks, dragging myself uphill through brush so dense I could barely see. When I reached the top, I stumbled forward onto gravel, a road. Real pavement, a county road with faded lines in a ditch and a rusted guardrail and all the ordinary miraculous features of a world that still obeyed itself. I collapsed there and lay on my back gasping at the sky. Above me, for the first time in hours, I saw normal darkness, normal stars behind fast-moving cloud, normal cold. I don't know how long I lay there, long enough for the shaking to start, long enough for the adrenaline to drain and leave only pain and exhaustion and the nauseating realization that I was alone. Eventually, headlights appeared around a bend, an old pickup. The driver stopped when he saw me half in the road and got out swearing, thinking I was drunk or hit or both. I tried to tell him there were people in the woods, that someone was hurt, that we needed to go back. He looked past me toward the tree line and said, "Son, there's nothing back there." I sat up. "There's a whole settlement, a church." He frowned. "What church?" I turned and pointed. There was only forest, no lights, no steeple, no road leading down, just trees. Search teams went out the next morning after I finally reached a sheriff's station and gave a statement bad enough that they asked me twice if I was under the influence. They found Ryan's truck. That much was real. Same place we'd left it. Engine started on the first try. Our gear was scattered around it. No Ryan, no Claire, no church, no settlement. The deputies said I must have gotten turned around in the woods after dark, that old foundations and collapsed outbuildings in abandoned logging areas can look like houses if you're panicked enough. That shock distorts memory. That maybe there had once been a church somewhere nearby and my mind stitched the rest together under stress. Maybe they even believed that. I don't, because some things don't fit. Claire's notebook, for one. Most of it was field notes and copied records, but on the last page, written in a hand so hurried the letters cut into the paper, was a single line. It makes room for itself. Don't carry it home. There was no figure with the truck. I never told them about it. I was afraid that if I described it too clearly, I'd somehow be admitting it into the world again. For months after that, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw windows between the trees, porches in places that shouldn't have had them, a faceless thing stepping out of a doorway just as I turned away. Eventually, with enough time and therapy and medication, the sharp edges dulled. Not enough to forget, just enough to function. I moved to a different city, changed apartments twice, stopped taking field jobs, stopped going near old religious structures entirely. For a while that almost worked. Then the apartment started feeling wrong. The first time it happened, I blamed exhaustion. I came home late from work and stood in my kitchen with groceries in both hands, suddenly certain the room was deeper than it should have been. Not bigger in any obvious architectural sense, just proportionally off. The far wall seemed a little farther away, the hallway a little longer. I set the bags down and measured the kitchen with my eyes until the feeling passed. A week later, I woke at 3:14 a.m. because I thought someone was standing at the end of the hall. No one was there, but the hall looked longer than it had the night before. After that, it started happening more often, a corner seeming to shift when I wasn't looking directly at it, the bedroom door farther from the bathroom than I remembered, the living room window reflecting more darkness than the room behind me should contain. I told myself this was trauma, hypervigilance, dissociation, the brain misreading space under stress. Then I found dirt on the inside of the window. Not much, just a thin line on the sill, damp and dark, with one tiny wood shaving caught in it. Last month I saw the reflection. Only once. I was washing a glass at the sink after midnight. The kitchen light was on, everything else dark. I looked up without thinking and saw, in the black reflection of the living room window behind me, a shape standing in the doorway. Tall, still, human only in the roughest possible sense. No features, no face. I turned so fast I dropped the glass. The doorway was empty, but the hole behind it looked deeper than before. I haven't slept properly since, so that's the story, or as much of it as I can tell without feeling like I'm opening a door that should stay shut. If any of this sounds familiar, if you've heard of towns that change, churches built over older sites, faceless wooden figures used as anchors or boundaries, tell me. And if you've ever been somewhere that seemed to make room for itself after you entered it, tell me that too. Because I think Claire was right. I don't think it was just a place. I think it was something using a place. And I think when Ryan lifted that figure, we didn't free it, we just gave it more space. The worst part is this. Sometimes, very late, when the apartment is quiet enough, I hear a house settling somewhere nearby. A porch board creaking, a hinge moving slowly, a soft weight shifting just outside my field of vision. And every time I hear it, I know exactly what thought will come next, no matter how hard I fight it. Not that it found me, not that it followed me, something worse, that maybe it never left.